The worst ways to deal with negative thoughts. So, one of my favorite movies is The Karate Kid. It's an absolute classic, by far one of the most iconic movies back in the 80s, but also of all time. And the way The Karate Kid works is that you have Daniel's son who comes to this master. His name is Mr. Miyagi, and he wants him to teach him how to, do karate, if you will. And at the beginning, their relationship wasn't the best. It was a little rocky, if you will. And the reason why is because Daniel just couldn't understand Mr. Miyagi, so the master. One day, he was out in the driveway, if you will, and Mr. Miyagi gives him a bucket. He gives him, a sponge, if you will, and tells him to basically clean the car, right? And he's cleaning the car, and he's upset. He's like, yo, when are we ever going to do some real karate stuff? And Mr. Miyagi, he steps back and he starts to teach him the whole idea behind the washing of the car, or as we all know, the wax on, wax off method, if you will. And what Mr. Miyagi was trying to teach Daniel was how to block punches when they're thrown his way. Because before, he just didn't know how to do it, right? He was totally new to karate. But now he has this metaphor. Now he has this skill, this technique that he can use when he goes and he's participating in the tournament that he eventually goes and he wins. And it's all because he taught him this method along with other methods as well. What I'm going to do in this podcast is I'm going to teach you the wax on, wax off methods of being able to deal with negative thoughts. Now, before I go into step one, definitely want to subscribe to this podcast, okay? Because when you subscribe to this podcast, you get more of these wax on, wax off techniques, if you will, to help you with anything that you're going through. So I may use examples that may be business related or career related because that's typically my audience. But believe me, I've worked with clients that are dealing with trauma, addictions, relationship issues, right? Like so many different things. And they're still able to use these techniques to help them to change their life and have the transformations that they're looking for. So if that sounds interesting to you, if it sounds helpful to you, definitely subscribe to this channel. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get to point number one. So one of the worst ways to deal with negative thoughts is to actually fight them. Because when you start to engage with negative thoughts, you have to acknowledge now that they have a say. So what am I trying to say here, right? I'll give you an example. So if you've ever been in middle school or elementary school and you had someone else teasing you, someone that was a bully, if you will, right? They keep poking you, calling you names and things like that. When you start to engage with them, when you start to yell back at them, try to tease them back and things like that, maybe even get in a fight with them and lose, you start to acknowledge that this bully, he has his hooks on you. He's getting under your skin. He's able to annoy you, if you will. And what does the bully start to do now? He starts to take it up a notch. He starts to bully you even more because now you're a sense of pleasurement for him. You're a sense of fun for him because you're engaging with him. If you were ever able to ignore him, to let it go, to show him that you weren't getting to him, he will find that it was boring and he will find someone else to bother, someone else to tease. Your mind is the same way. Negative thoughts are the same way. As I mentioned with point number one, when you fight them, you now have to acknowledge that they have some type of say in your life. You now have to acknowledge that they have some type of power, some type of weight, if you will. And what we don't want to do is to give them that type of power or respect. And the best way to take that power away from them is to allow them to be there, to not fight them, to accept that negative thoughts is a part of life. Because honestly and truthfully, they are. Whenever you try something new, you're going to step into what's called the fear zone. This zone where you just don't know what you're doing. Things are scary. You're afraid of messing up or being rejected. All these things are things that happen in that first zone, that fear zone, if you will. But if you manage to push through that zone, you'll get into the next zone, which is the learning zone, where you're actually able to learn the things that you need to know to accomplish the goals that you're trying to accomplish. That's the key. You got to stay in the fight long enough to see that things may not be what they appear to be at first, meaning your mind, your negative thoughts, it may not be as scary as you once thought it was. And that is the power of being able to let go of negative thoughts. I'll give you another metaphor to go with this. So this one's a sports related one. If you ever gone to a sports arena, if you will, or even seen a game on TV, you have fans that are rooting for the team, right? The home team, but you also have fans that are rooting against them, right? And what happens is if a superstar, so let's say like LeBron, Steph Curry, or Kevin Durant, if they ever stopped what they were doing on the court to go up in the stands and argue with someone, they would then lose the most key advantage they have in the game, which is being on the court. Every time you step into your mind, so start to overthink, get lost in your thoughts. Every time you step into the arena, every time you step into the crowd, into the stands, you lose your power. You lose your number one key advantage over your negative thoughts, over the fans. The fans are there to get you off your game. They're there to yell and scream at you whenever you miss a shot, or dare I even say air ball. But if we don't acknowledge them, if we don't take time to focus on them, and we stay focused on the person that's in front of us, stay focused on the goal, right? Literally and metaphorically, we will give ourselves the best chance to be successful. So again, point number one of the worst ways to deal with negative thoughts is to fight them, because once you start to engage with them, you acknowledge that they have a say. You acknowledge that they have some type of power. The second worst way to deal with negative thoughts is by suppressing them. Now, when you suppress your thoughts, you may think, you know what? They go away. I can stuff them under the rug, if you will, for the time being. But eventually, you're going to trip over that rug. And when that happens, you're going to have one of the biggest boo-boos, cuts, or mistakes or falls that you've ever had. Suppressing your thoughts is something that we call ignoring or struggling with our thoughts. It's like you have this suitcase and you're trying to stuff it with all your clothes because you know you're going on a flight, and you're just stuffing and stuffing and stuffing, and you're just using all of this energy. And the thing is all this energy that you're using to try to stuff this suitcase could actually be energy that you use towards this goal that you have set for yourself, that you have set for your business or your career. But that's the thing with negative thoughts, right? Suppressing them, the only thing that happens is they start to grow. They don't go anywhere, even though we think they do, right? You stuff it in the closet, or as I said, you stuff it on the rug. You think that it's gone, but it's just simply out of sight. And what ends up happening is that an event or a new thought may come, and it's going to explode everything that you've been holding in. This is why sometimes people erupt at the smallest of things. It's because they've been holding stuff in the whole time. But if you were to just say, you know what, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through. So in other words, if you were just simply open about the things you were thinking, about the things that were going on in your life, if you took time to journal some of your thoughts that you've been struggling with, it would serve as a release. And if you're able to keep this release going, you'll find yourself able to manage negative thoughts over the long haul. Because here's the thing, life in your mind, it will never be short of negative thoughts. And if you want to make it to your goals, to your destiny and all that stuff, you need to find a healthy way to release some of these thoughts, to acknowledge, to express, to process some of these negative thoughts. And journaling is a great way. Seeing a therapist like myself is another. But also just speaking to your friends. Because what you would actually find is that they have some of the same negative thoughts you do. Trust me when I say this. I sit in these therapy sessions and I cannot tell you how often I hear the thought of I'm not good enough being something that my clients struggle with. I know that you may feel like you're the only one with this thought, but if you were actually able to open up to other people, you will see that they also have that thought too, but also you'll see that they're able to be successful with that thought. That's another thing that maybe I'll go into another episode about, but I'll touch on this just a little bit. You can have negative thoughts and be successful at the same time. You can feel anxious and do something really, really well. Sometimes we forget that. We believe that our thoughts and feelings are indicators of whether or not something's going to go well or not. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Trust me when I say you can do great things even when your mind isn't on the same page as you. And that's because your mind really is like a negative fan that's in the stands just booing at you, right? Just telling you all the negative things, all the things that you've messed up with, right? That's just how the mind is. Sometimes it will be that fan that's cheering you on, or the cheerleader that's cheering you on. That does happen. But sometimes they're just an angry fan, just upset, trying to get you to get off your game. Main point number 3, and before I give it, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. So main point number 3, in terms of the worst ways to deal with negative thoughts, is that you believe that you're the only one dealing with them. And what that leads to is you isolating yourself versus feeling more connected with other people that also are feeling or having these negative thoughts. So again, main point number 3 of one of the worst ways to deal with negative thoughts is that you believe that you're the only one dealing with them. When it comes to self-compassion, there's 3 areas to it. One of the areas that I want to touch on is the common humanity versus isolation piece. Something unfortunately very tragic happened to one of my friends. He had a brother who literally just this past weekend lost his life. And I can't even imagine what that must be like. Truly, 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 to lose a brother is not something that I've experienced. And I know at this time, him and his family is really going through it. And they're going through it because they have a lot of love for his brother, their son, right? So naturally, people will go through this grieving stage, right? What tends to happen, though, is that people tend to shut down during those times. They look at God or whoever they worship or the universe and they ask, why is this always happening to me? Why is this happening to my family? Why did this have to happen to my brother? And what ends up happening is that we start to isolate and feel like in this world of 4.6 billion people, I am the only one that is struggling with this. I'm the only one that's dealing with this. And that is not fair. And when we get into that way of thinking, it makes it very hard for us to open up. It makes it very hard for us to let go and feel that this is something that we can get through. This is something that is very unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. And it's also something that many other people have gone through and have been able to have it sounds crazy, but has been able to have a valuable life, even with the grief that they feel. It sounds like I'm contradicting, but I'm not. And that's the belief that a lot of people, they tend to struggle with. And this is why people fall into addictions. People believe that to have a valuable life, they have to get rid of this pain. And the only way for them to get rid of that pain is to pick up a bottle, use drugs, or anything like that. But if you can see that you can deal with pain, you can have grief, and still at moments have a very valuable, loving, exciting life, you would be able to live life with this pain. When you don't believe this, you actually put yourself into what's called suffering. All right, that's when your pain is almost 10x. And it's also a lot longer lasting, if you will. You don't have to go through that. But we can only get to that place when we start to focus on the humanity. And to do this, we have to start to be more open to speaking to people about the things that we experience, the things that we go through. Joining something like a support group. So using this example specifically, a grief support group would be amazing for this person. If you're going through, let's say, a divorce, thinking that, man, I must be a terrible husband, terrible wife, or maybe a terrible parent if you guys had kids involved, going to a support group for people that have recently been divorced will be a great, great place for you to go to see that other people have walked this path, but have also came out on the other side of it. This is what humanity is all about. But if you find yourself just shutting down, suppressing things, kind of just falling into a deep black hole, right? That is where these negative thoughts will start to get bigger, stronger, more consuming, if you will. And that is when it becomes really hard to shake them. And that is where depression starts to be created. So with that being said, I'm going to go over these top 3 ways that negative thoughts, or the top 3 worst ways to deal with negative thoughts. So the first one, as I said, fighting them is the worst way, because once you start to engage with them, you acknowledge that they have a say. Again, it's like the fans in the stands example. All right. Point number 2, suppressing them. Suppressing your thoughts is like trying to stuff a whole bunch of clothes inside of a suitcase. You're just using unnecessary energy. And the bad part about this is when you open that suitcase, all those clothes are going to spill out, meaning something bad could happen. A negative thought, a situation can happen, and you may just blow up simply because you've been suppressing things for the past 5 years. Make sure you find someone to open up, even if you have to start with the journal. Find someone, somewhere, or something to open up with. And then point number 3, you believe you're the only one dealing with these negative thoughts. And this is where that isolation really starts to become dangerous. And you want to find the other people that are struggling with this to show you that you can make it on the other side of these negative thoughts. So this is Coach Wells, and I appreciate you checking out this channel.